What is going on, people? It's time for some more GCSE maths. You gotta love it, I know. This time on the sine and cosine rules, also including how to work out the area of a triangle. Thanks so much for watching in advance, and if you find this helpful, don't be afraid to check out that subscribe button down below and leave a massive thumbs up, because it will really help out my channel. Anyway, this is the part where we should probably do some work, so cue the next slide. So let's start with the sine rule. So I've set out 4 steps here to tackle these kind of questions. Step number 1 is label the triangle, and by that I just mean if you have your triangle here and you've got angle A, angle B and angle C, you can work out which side corresponds with the angle because it's always opposite. So the side opposite C here will be C, and you represent that with a lowercase letter, whereas angles are represented with uppercase letters. And this would be side A because it's opposite again, and then this side over here will be side B. So that's all I mean by label the triangle. Step number 2 is write down the formula, which is pretty self-explanatory, I think. And then step number 3, choose the part of the formula you need. So by this, all I mean, for example, is let's take this question up here, number 1. It only involves A and B. So you only really need the part of the equation that is A over sine A equals B over sine B. So you don't necessarily need this part. But this varies with each question. But you usually only need 2 of the 3 possible fractions there. And flip if necessary. What I mean by that is when you're finding a side, it's easier to put the side on the top of the equation. So A over sine A, as it says there. If you want to find an angle, then it's easier to do sine A over A because it's a bit easier to rearrange the equation, and we'll come on to that later. And step number 4, finally, is substitute given values into the formula and solve the equation, which is again pretty self-explanatory. So let's start with question number 1 here. Find the length of side AC to 1 decimal place. And as you can see here, we're given 2 angles and 1 side. So step number 1, label the triangle. So A is up here, so little a is going to be down here. And B is over here, little b is over here. And C isn't really involved in this question, but it would be here. I know, that's sort of the same size. This C should be a bit bigger. And the next step, step number 2, I'll put a little number 2 here. Write down the formula. And now we move on to step number 3. Choose the part of the formula that you need. And as I mentioned earlier, it's only A and B that are involved in this question, and we want to find small a. So all we really need is A over sine A equals B over sine B, because C isn't really relevant in this question. You don't need to flip the fractions because we're finding a side and the side's already on the top. So step number 4 is you need to substitute the values in. So we know A is 12, so it's 12 over sine A is 80 degrees, sine 80 equals x over sine 45. Now to work out what x is, we have to rearrange the equation. So x equals 12 over sine 80 times sine 45, which equals 8.61618 blah 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 centimeters. And the question asks for 1 decimal place, so that equals 8.6 centimeters. Question number 2. This one wants 1 angle and 2 sides. It says find angle ABC to 3 significant figures. So the angle we want is this one here, x. So we all know step number 1 is to label the triangle, write down the formula, and step number 3, choose the part of the formula you need. Again, it's only A and B involved. And as it wants us to find an angle this time instead of a side, you should flip this to become sine A over A equals sine B over. And substituting our values in, sine A here, the angle is sine 30 over, A is 5 meters, so over 5 equals sine x over 7. So rearranging this, we get sine x equals sine 30 over 5 times 7, which equals 7/10, I believe. And then to find x, this is still sine x, this answer, so we need to do the inverse to find x. So x equals sine to the minus 1, and you do that on your calculator by pressing shift before sine. 7/10, which then goes on to equal 44.427 degrees, which the question wants to 3 significant figures, which equals 44.4 degrees. Lots of 4s. And that's that question done and dusted. So let's move on. So again, there's 4 steps here, pretty similar to last time. The only different one here is number 3, where it's rearrange the formula if needed, because if you need to find an angle, you have to completely rearrange the formula to give you, so you're able to find this angle when you're given all 3 sides. So let's roll into the first question at the top here. This is when you need to find 2 sides and an angle that is enclosed between those 2 sides. That's when you use the cosine rule. Find the length of side CB to 2 decimal places. So CB is x here. Label the triangle A, B, C. That's number 1. Tick it off your list, guys, and move on to the next step. Stuff's too easy, you know. Write down the formula. Brand new formula, nice and shiny. And we don't need to rearrange the formula because we're finding a side. So A is x, so x squared equals B, 7. 7 squared plus C, 8. 8 squared minus 2 times 7 times 8 times cos, and A is 25 degrees, which then I believe goes on to equal, so x squared equals 11.4935 blah blah blah. If we want to find x, we need to square root this, so x equals root of the answer, and that goes on to equal 3.39021 blah 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 centimeters. The question asks for 2 decimal places, which equals 3.39 centimeters. Bish bash bosh. On to question number 2 of this slide, where you need to find all 3 sides and they don't give you any angles. That's rather cheeky of them, if I'm honest. It's absolutely disgraceful that they expect us to do this much work, but we're going to have to go with it. Same rules apply. Label the triangle. I think we're getting the hang of this right now. Bang. Next. Write down the formula. Well, we're going to be needing to find an angle and we have all the sides, so I'm afraid we're going to need to rearrange. Cos A equals B squared plus C squared minus A squared over 2BC. So I'll put this as number 3, but we sort of skipped over number 2 because it's not really relevant on this question. And in terms of this formula here, it's best to memorize this before your exam because it's annoying. Like most things in exams, you just need to know them. If you take nothing else out of this slide, cos A equals B squared plus C squared minus A squared over 2BC. Sorry, I've had that ingrained in my head. Substitute given values into the equation. Well, we're given A, so A equals 14, B equals 16, C equals 20. Now we're ready to move on and tackle this question. Cos A equals B squared, which is 16 squared, plus C squared, which is 20 squared, minus a squared, which is 14 squared, all over 2 times b, which is 16, times c, which is 20, which then will go on to give us an answer of 23/32. And I'm sure you guys all know how to do an inverse, but I'll say it again just in case. You need to press shift on your calculator and then cos to find the inverse. So a equals cos to the -1 answer, which is 23/32, which equals 44.0486 blah 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 degrees, which the question wants 3 significant figures. Never forget this. This is an extra easy mark. Don't forget that. Which equals 44.0 degrees. And boom, yet another question under our belts. Which let's roll into the final slide. Let's go. Areas of triangles. I know you're going to be saying to me, oh, what area of triangles? That's pips. Half times base times height. But no, it can get a bit more complicated than that, I'm afraid. I mean, I don't know who invented maths, why they just like to make everything complicated, but it is. We'll just have to live with it. So firstly, there's 3 steps. Label the triangle, which we know how to do by now. Come on, let's be honest. And we want to write down a brand new shiny formula that you need to learn. Area equals half times a times b times sine c. So substitute given values into the equation is number 3. So let's try tackling this question now with this brand new knowledge we've acquired. So we've already done step number 1, write down the formula. Step number 3 is substitute the given values. So area equals half times. So let's see what a is. A is 9. Half times 9 times b is 14. 14 times sine. Sine c is 55 degrees. Sine 55. And the area will go on to equal 51.6065 blah 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 meters squared. And the question wants 3 sig figs, which equals 51.6 meters squared. Phew, that's it, guys. I hope you guys are feeling a bit better about your trigonometry skills after that. In case you haven't smashed those important buttons I mentioned earlier down below, I mean, if you haven't, hello, what is going on? Make sure you do so, as it will put a big smile on my face. Anyway, guys, hope you've enjoyed. It's been emotional. I'll catch you later.